Hello, good afternoon everybody. Can you hear me? Yep. Yes, you can. Wonderful. So welcome. This is the 2:15 slot on harnessing the power of social learning. If you're in the wrong room, feel free to leave, or I can tempt you and stay. I've been asked several times if anybody is introducing me. So if any of you would like to introduce me, now's the time. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and crack on. My name is Ben Betts. I work for a company called HT2. My company does research and development for learning and performance software. So we create new software that helps us to enhance mostly workplace, but also educational online experiences. And my particular background is in researching a bit about what I call peer-to-peer learning, about how people learn from each other. And I've been very interested in this for 5 or 10 years. I've been in e-learning for 15 years. I think probably my whole career has been in e-learning, and I've always been slightly underwhelmed by things, and clearly there's people in capes and all sorts that are also underwhelmed by this. So they've got a dancing troupe, and I've got a slide deck. This is my take on how we could improve things. So I'm a big believer in thinking about how we can treat our learners as adults and how they can learn from and with each other in online corporate learning environments. Today, I want to talk to you about a bit of a framework that I work with in terms of how I think that we as L&D professionals can create a sort of playbook of tools and techniques and interactions that you can look to harness to drive more social learning in your organization. And I'm going to frame that up front, and then going to move into a case study with Intercontinental Hotels. Karina Davis should have been here, she's not, and she's from Intercontinental. Her and her team worked unbelievably hard last summer to create quite a unique, massive open online course and a range of other interventions that they used really quite successfully at IHG. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about that. So my sort of framing for today, the way in which I think about how we can harness the power of social learning, comes down to 3 ideas for me: inspiration, instruction, and implementation. And I guess this is kind of what I feel that we do. If you work in corporate L&D or any L&D, education for that matter, I feel like it's our job to help provide the inspiration, to get people wanting to learn something new, to want to understand more, to instruct, to give them models and tools and techniques that help them frame how they might do something, and to help them implement it, to help them actually get on with the job. Quite often we get stuck in that middle one of instructing, but I advocate to think that actually we're on a journey with this with our learning processes, and so just telling people, adult experienced learners, what they must do next doesn't always work, especially when we're talking to leaders, people who we want to get feedback from, whose ideas matter. So this is my frame for today: inspiration, instruction, and implementation. And we're going to talk through some of the tools and techniques we use to sort of bring this to life. Now, I wanted to start talking about inspiration, and as a killer piece, I thought I'd do something interactive that uses the internet. Now, I've been slightly disappointed that this probably doesn't work, but can you guys if you've got your phones, do they work? Are they online? Can you get online? All right, if you've got a device on you that can get online, then get it out and do me a favor. Go to this URL in your web browser. It's tinyurl.com/Wolce, WOLCE. See if you can get there, tinyurl.com/Wolce. And on this page, when you get there, you will load up what's called a Padlet. And this is a little interactive whiteboard where you guys can just tap on the screen and type what you think. There's 2 questions, and first of all, I'd like you to think about the first question. The first question is, where are you when inspiration hits? And I mean physically. Where are you in the world when an idea comes to you? When you first have that magical moment of, oh, I could do this with this, or if only this worked like this, or, you know, I'm in the kitchen slicing a pineapple, there's a better way to slice a pineapple. Where are you when these things occur? Just tell me a little bit about that, and I'm going to see whether this could go horribly wrong, so we'll see. So, out of that, no, there. So this is what it looks like if you've got a laptop. If you've not got a laptop, it'll look like something else, and you can tap on it. This is a really good tool, by the way, if you're just doing something like this. This is Padlet, it's free. and you can just come in here and get some interactive whiteboarding type stuff going. Social learning in action, if you will. Is that on the refresh icon? Anybody? Thank you. God damn it. Damn you, world of learning. Okay, short-lived. Is anybody else on that? Does it work? Yes, there's occasional yeses. So, connect, damn you. So, can anybody see anybody else's ideas? Can anybody shout out what somebody else has put on it for me? Give me a hand.
People say they like the shower.
They like the shower. The shower is popular. Is the shower a good choice? Ah, ha, ha, ha. So, just getting out of bed, usually outdoors, on the train, at the airport, shower. Shower is popular. Shower is my choice of idea place. And I find that there's a connection between where I'm least likely to have a pen and paper and where ideas occur. And so the shower, I need some sort of waterproof routine to get in there and doing something, because otherwise I'm just totally screwed. So keep filling it out. There's a second question here that you can think about. You don't have to do it online if you don't want to. But having had your idea, having had your magical idea, the magical way to slice a pineapple, who do you share that with? Who do you tell first? Who's the first person that you go to and say, I've got a brilliant way of doing this differently, of doing something different? Who's the first person that you talk to? So, anyone who will listen, SCAC. Should that say Slack? Let me see. So, I'll move some of these around, if I can. Come on, damn you. No, can't move it. Can't move that one. Can't move anything. Well, it's kind of working, but it wasn't working as well as I'd wanted it to. So we're going to go for that. So shout them out if you can't see the things. My bonkers ideas, which I will implement when I take over the world. Is that going to say in the bottom corner there? Probably. So, I mean, it really depends, for me, who I tell my idea to in terms of how stupid the idea is or how badly formed the idea is. Because if I'm really excited about it, if I think this could change everything, then I tell my dad, because he's unbelievably positive. And he'll take my idea and it's a wonderful idea. That's a wonderful idea. Let's run with that. Let's do it. Now, if I were to take that same idea to my wife, she wouldn't be quite so fulsome of praise. She would be a little bit more cynical. And it goes from a scale of, I'm not listening to you, to that's a stupid idea. And so I have to kind of moderate where I take my ideas in order to watch them grow. But I'll reorganize this, and this will be up online afterwards. You can go and have a look. But I think the thing that struck me most when I was thinking about where I go for inspiration was, well, two things. One is, inspiration rarely strikes me at the moment that it kind of should. So, like, if you're in a learning environment or something like that, or you're doing something new for the first time in a place like today, there's moments, but it's not until actually I get home that I'm thinking about it later, the next day, the next week, or something like that, that enough sparks fly to go, oh, well, actually, this is how I could do something different. So inspiration comes kind of most commonly, and whenever I do this exercise, it is things like in the shower, on the train, usually outdoors, generally when I'm not thinking about it, or when I'm not at work. Tends to be when I have the best ideas at things. And then that second part, telling somebody about it, this is the kind of critical part that really refines my idea and decides whether it's going to go any further, because I find that when I have to externalize my ideas, when I have to actually explain what I'm thinking to somebody for the first time, that's when it either all comes together or it all falls apart. Because in my head, it can be really quite clear what my intention is for you to do. But the second I have to write it down or send an email or explain it to my wife, this is the moment where it all falls apart, because I'm just not able to articulate it, or I use it to refine it. And so I find that this process of actually explaining or trying to get people to comprehend what I'm talking about when I'm thinking about new ideas, new inspiration, is absolutely key to whether or not that idea goes any further. So close. Gonna have to drag it back across. Hi. Is that it? Damn, wrong button. So, technology is failing me. So what I wanted to think about today was about how social kind of impacts that whole journey of learning, and that it's actually in the act of me talking to people, of sharing ideas, of getting things done, that I actually refine what I'm thinking about, refine my learning. And I think that our tools, especially our technology, should be almost seamlessly social, and that we end up with this kind of a bit of a rotten opinion of what social looks like. For a lot of people, social learning is kind of the thing that happens kind of afterwards or on the side of a learning experience. So, hey, look, go take the course, go be on the thing, and then go look at the forum, or go write a blog, or be in the wiki. These are things that generally don't work. You end up with empty blogs, forums with nobody putting anything in them. Very embarrassing as a thing. Nobody's coming to chat to me. So how can I get participation in these things? But for me, that's because we've misunderstood the importance of social. For me, social isn't something that you do once you've perfected an idea and you're ready to share it. It's actually part and parcel of creating the idea, of refining the idea, of being open to feedback. And so I advocate that to harness the power of social learning, you've got to be seamlessly social. You've got to put social right in and amongst it at every given opportunity. And that's both at the inspiration stage as well as instruction and implementation. Kind of make sense? With me so far? Not so annoyed with tech? So, I call this my social learning playbook. So when I'm thinking about, well, what tools, what techniques can I bring to make an experience seamlessly social, then I get one of these out. And in fact, if you're really sad, at the end, I've got a bunch of them there, and you can fill those out for yourselves. The idea is that I look at this matrix. This is one of the first exercises I do when I think about a new experience you want to make. And down the side there, I've got kind of inspiration, instruction, implementation. And then at the top, I've got this little kind of continuum from things that are very structured, things that I set out, the rules of engagement that I facilitate, that I do, to very unstructured things, less structured things. There's kind of a continuum there. You could have put formal to informal learning. Because social learning is a very big encompassing term. To say we're doing social learning doesn't say anything. It's just part and parcel of how people can learn and what they can do. So actually, there's a lot to social learning. And I think about, when I'm thinking about my playbook, and I'm thinking about what are the things that I would look to do, this might be different to you, then when I'm thinking about looking to inspire people, I'm thinking about, at the very structured end, should we do something face-to-face? Should we do something with a webinar, an interaction that's taking place synchronously online that we all take part in? And that's quite structured because, well, today you've all had to turn up at 2:15 in here. You wouldn't have got it otherwise. So there's quite a lot of structure there, and I'm going to go through a slide deck. Then at the other end of the scale, you've got this kind of social networking idea where actually, well, look, what can we get on SharePoint or Jive or any of these social networking platforms you might have in your company, a SharePoint? And think about, well, can I get inspiration from that? What I see a lot of companies doing is they kind of start at this social networking end, and it doesn't necessarily take off. So it's like, oh yeah, we've got an enterprise social network, but nobody really uses it. It's not really changed anything. I think it's a really tough place to start, because you're going from like, hey, look, there's no social in our organization, to the social in our organization is just log on and crack on whenever you want. And the instant reaction is, well, I shan't. I mean, if you're faced with that, how are you feeling today sort of box at the top of a company intranet page or something like that, I'm feeling like I don't want to fill it out. That's how I'm feeling today. I'm not in the sharing mood right now. So I feel like a lot of people start at this less structured end, and they haven't introduced people to the idea of being more social in the first place. In between that, we see ideas of things like Twitter chats or something like that. Has anybody ever taken part in a Twitter chat? 2, 3 people. You guys should really get together, because like, you're like a little hub of Twitter chatting over there. You could actually talk to each other face to face. No, for that. So on a Twitter chat, then whoever wants to join in a Twitter chat can. They just follow a hashtag, be in a certain place at a certain time, and ask and answer questions back and forth. So it's less structured. You're not really sure what questions are going to be asked all the time, although you can plan it. You're not sure what the answers are going to be. You're not sure who's going to participate. But all of these things are things that I think about for inspiration. And I'm going to talk about how IHG used webinars as their point of inspiration for their social learning experience. Then I think about instruction, and I think about what can we do to inject more social, how can we harness the power of social in our instruction. And at the very formal end, I think about e-learning, and at the less formal end, I think about things like coaching, mentoring. So when I'm talking about social e-learning, I'm thinking about the opportunity to respond. A lot of e-learning that people build and that have in their organization is relatively static. You may click through it, you may have dynamic elements to it, but there's no real right of reply. So we're thinking about this in like IHG's world, where they're trying to train leaders and managers. It's all very well saying, hey, look, you should have a conversation like this. But everyone knows you don't survive first contact when you're actually going to do this for the first time. So it's great that you put out a model. But the bottom line is, that's not how it works in my department. That's not how it works in my world. There's a whole world of learning to become out of that sort of stuff if you can give people the right of reply. At a slightly less structured end, I think about ideas like MOOCs, massive open online courses. Familiar with the concept of a massive open online course? The few heads going both ways, kind of fairly vigorous at both. So massive open online courses got quite a lot of press, more press than e-learning has in years, in recent times, to come out of the idea of quite an education-focused sort of idea, that actually we're all going to log on to a course where being interactive, feeding back, answering discussion questions, and exploring and adding new content back in is really part and parcel of it. So it's massive, can go to thousands. So instead of concentrating on small class sizes, getting 10 people, 30 people, they want 300, 3,000, 300,000 people to take part. And the notion is that it's valuable to be massive because there's more ideas in the room, basically. The bigger the room is, the more connectivity, the more inspiration I've got. Now, filtering through that can be a challenge. Curating all of those ideas into something you can do is a challenge. But that's actually, in a MOOC land, kind of part of the experience, is that actually by aggregating, by taking content from places, you're instructing yourself. I don't know if you find this, but previous life or previous role, I used to do a lot of sort of constructing e-learning. And I would do it on whatever subject people wanted. So I've done stuff for the NHS, for legal, for marketing, whatever. And all of a sudden you find yourself, it was the Pony Club, that was my favourite one. I find myself understanding the difference between a menage and a tail bandage and things like that. And there's something about, in the process of me, the instructional designer, putting the course together, I learn a ton about whatever subject it is that I'm doing. I'm no subject matter expert on it, but I can tell you a menage. And there's something about that process of actually, look, here's the world of content, make sense of it yourself, that I think is really valuable. I think it's a social learning process. And you can also think about things that are less structured than that, connecting people with mentors and coaches, peer-to-peer, buddying up, things that actually help people that aren't particularly structured, but help people get instructed on the job. My final piece is around implementation, and this is where traditionally we lack. We generally, I feel, maybe it's unfair, but a lot of L&D kind of seems to stop at the end of the classroom, at the completion of the e-learning or something like that. It's generally, we always want to step over into, hey, you're actually doing your job better, but it's difficult. And it's difficult that people make that leap. So you'll be familiar with ideas of action learning or project-based learning, where you get people to work through real-world scenarios. And that's quite structured. But then you can also look at trends like objectives and key results. Anybody come across OKRs? So it's the next American thing that's going to hit and change you all there. You used to induct people, now you onboard people. And next, you used to have appraisals, now you'll have OKRs. So OKRs are about quarterly goal setting, basically, but thinking about how you can make that really measurable. There's lots of software and tools and theories on this already. But it's kind of semi-structured. Each quarter we're going to set goals, but then real-world data being gathered to actually see that you're implementing things in the way you should be implementing things. And then we see a lot of internal comms tools. You know, if you've got Salesforce, you've got Chatter, you've got Yammer or Skype or Link or whatever the hell it is Microsoft are calling it. And then if you're in a newer world, you'll have tools like Slack. And these are tools that people use to talk to each other in real time, taking stuff out of email and then putting it into a social space. We've installed Slack at our company. We've had it for a couple of years, maybe now, year and a half. And my email from internal stuff has gone down 90%. It's not perfect. It's far from it. But it gives me a nice idea that actually if I can talk to people in a kind of semi-public forum behind the firewall inside my company, I don't need to CC people on email. We just do stuff here. But these are the sorts of things that the L&D department needs to understand, because these are the tools people will use when they have problems, when they try to apply things. So getting involved in what's going on in your organization's chat stuff is, I think, really important. So that's my social learning playbook. Yours will look different, probably. The idea is that if I want to inspire people, these are the things that I might do. If I want to instruct people, these are some of the things I might do. And if I want to help them implement something on the job, these are some of the things I might do. I might do all of them. I might only do one or a handful of them. It depends on the culture, on the environment, and what I'm going into. But this is what I think is key to me thinking about how am I going to harness the power of social learning. For intercontinental hotels, I'm just going to focus on the instruction channel for the most part, because I think it's easiest to get on with. Obviously, when I say things like, oh, you know, hey, just run a MOOC, or do some social e-learning, like that's not massively helpful in terms of what are you going to do when you go back tomorrow. So intercontinental hotels, they had something that was a massive open online course. We used 3 sort of techniques that our research has shown to be quite effective in engaging people through that instructional part of the process. So questioning, gamification, and short content, micro content you could call it, which are all themes that are out there, were things that we harnessed here. Not always for the benefit of the good, sometimes didn't go so well. So when I'm talking about questioning, I'm thinking about going back to like teaching 101 days. If anybody's got a PGCE, you might have talked about Socratic questioning and things like this. It's the idea of how can you get people to have more meaningful learning conversations. So let's say you've got a forum or a chat of some sort, and somebody comes out with catch-all statement. All learning is social. Okay, maybe not. Where do you go from there? I think about tools around Socratic questioning to imagine how am I going to tease out more detail from an individual who's not really giving me very much. So this is a facilitated session. Someone's having to go in and think about it. And we think about these 4 ideas: the glad fly, the stingray, the midwife, and the ignoramus. So nipping away, trying to get an idea of why do you think that? What do you mean by that? Stinging someone, shocking them, thinking, well, that's just complete crap. What do you think? Why would you do it differently? Nurturing an idea, being the midwife. How can I persuade my boss that all learning is social? Because I'm totally on your side, Ben, but it's my boss that's the problem. So help me persuade my boss. Or just playing dumb. What is social? What do we do here? All the rest of it. It doesn't have to be a particularly dumb question. These are the sorts of techniques that we use and we encourage people to use to tease out better, and when I say better, I mean more critical discussion. Instead of just coming out with catch-all statements, they actually progress their thinking. Go back to inspiration. My wife is critical, but that's important. And it really scares people, this does. Being critical in a social learning environment scares people because they're so afraid that they're going to scare someone away from participating that you just go, oh yeah, that's wonderful. It's wonderful that you could take the time to type something to me. I love you. And you're like, but it's complete codswallop. So we need to do something about that. We've got to do something different. So being able to be critical in a constructive way, I think is hugely important. So we use Socratic questioning to get people making better quality discussion questions and answers. And I'll show you some results of that in a moment. We use gamification. Familiar with the term gamification? So it's using game-like mechanics and behaviors in a non-game environment. So giving people points or leaderboards or badges for their interactions, for the behaviors that they perform. Could be in a piece of e-learning, could be on a social learning platform, could be anywhere. This stuff is quite interesting, and I've been looking at this for a few years now. And it's interesting because it does actually work in a shocker of things. Nudging people towards participating with things like points and badges and leaderboards does, for the most part, have impact on what they do. It does shape people's behavior. I'm not convinced that that's necessarily about games. Maybe it is. but it's potentially about just good user experience design, that actually if I say that you're going to get points for doing this, or that you're going to get a badge if you do X, Y, Z, I'm nudging you towards the activity I want you to do. And actually, the biggest issue I've got with this is that it's too effective. People will do whatever they can to get points. And we've seen this time and time again. So I did some research at university, and we set out a gamified learning experience. We did it twice in a social learning routine. One, we made it kind of inconsequential that you got the points. The points were there, but you didn't need the points in order to progress. There was no need for them. They just signified that you'd participated more or less than somebody else with more points. The other one, we made it that you had to earn the points in order to progress. You had to participate in everything. And we ran it for 6 weeks. We had 32, 33 students in this environment, executive education, so sort of team leader, manager level, talking about operations and process management, and how they could transform their processes to do something more effective. And in that time, we had 3,000 plus contributions to our online social platform. This is the hard one. And then when we measured it, we used a process called cognitive presence to understand what they were actually saying and whether it was a critical thought they were demonstrating, whether they were applying some of those questioning techniques, evidencing their opinion, changing their mind, saying what they're going to do next, or whether it was just kind of noise. Any guesses? 78% of what they contributed out of 3,300 contributions was useless from a learning perspective. Well, not to say it was completely useless. There's a social community going on here, there's chat, there's stuff that's going between people, we're building relationships. But from a pure, does it look like somebody is changing their behavior, developing a new thought, looking at a new way of working? When we turned gamification onto everything, 80% of the responses were useless. It would have looked really good. If I'd taken my stats to the board and gone, guys, 6 weeks, 30 people, 3,000 comments, nailing it, give me the money. But the reality is, actually, only 22% of those were useful. It could be that this is a bit of a dichotomy, that actually you have to talk a lot before you get to something useful. That's true. I mean, conversation builds. But we have seen this time and again, where gamification is forced upon people, they use it, they play for points. Doesn't always come out to a good result. And I think that's, it's symptomatic of learning and of social. I think I have a personal vendetta against completion as being the ultimate measure of whether whether your learning's been successful. I kind of feel like what we're trying to get people to here is to go through a journey. I don't know what the end point is. Whereas I feel we're very, very focused on getting people to the end, and that's the measure, that they got to the end. But it kind of feels like listening to a piece of music and fast forwarding to the last 5 seconds, because actually that's the big bit. The end is where I really want to get to on this track. I need the last 10 seconds. That's where it all comes together. It never does. It's in the journey across that's actually important. Final bit on the 3 techniques. So we used questioning techniques to get people thinking a bit better. We used gamification, but only lightly, to get them shaped towards contributing, participating. And then we used really bloody short content. So we have 2 videos that are broadly equivalent of each other. One's 4 minutes, one's 8 minutes. And we measure the dwell time. Dwell time is how long somebody sits on the page. And the page isn't just a video. The video is there, but it also has a social text commentary, so a bit like YouTube, but hopefully not as crass, with comments coming in down the side. So when that video is 4 minutes long, people are staying, on average, over 9 minutes on the page, watching the video, looking at the comments, maybe contributing back themselves. When we made that video 8 minutes, they stay on the page 27 seconds on average. Now, this was just this one example. This isn't going to ring true everywhere. But we've seen time and time again that the idea of very small, bite-sized pieces of content is becoming increasingly important to us in the social learning world. Again, it's not important that the 4 or the 8 minute video gets over every idea in some perfect piece of knowledge transfer, because I'm looking for a conversation. I want a conversation starter. That's what I'm looking for out of my videos. But we found this to be true. edX, a much larger MOOC provider than I, has done some similar research and found their nexus to be about 6 and a bit minutes. So longer than this, still pretty short. So we use those 3 tactics, thinking about gamification, Socratic questioning, really short content, and then we went to work with IHG. We used a platform that I make called Curator, it's a social learning platform. And in terms of the playbook that we went through, we kind of went, okay, what they wanted to do was to have a conversation, a global conversation about having better feedback mechanisms. So Intercontinental Hotels running hotel group all over the world. So Holiday Inn, Holiday Inn Express, IHG, lots of brands that they have. They have thousands of people all over the world. They had about a target audience of about 3,500 team leaders that they'd identified through last year's appraisals that actually they weren't having very meaningful feedback conversations with people. What they were doing was they worked behind the bar and then they got promoted to be in charge of the bar and all their mates were still behind the bar, and it was a really difficult conversation for somebody to have now that they're team leader. They didn't have any framework or any way of knowing what it is they should be talking about. So IHG wanted to run a global event to talk people through a model of how to have better feedback conversations and then think about how they can transform the appraisal process as part of it. They'd done their research. They already wanted to do something social because they felt hypocritical telling people how to have conversations without having a conversation about it. They kind of felt like this isn't going to work for our people if we tell you how to have conversations. You have to tell us the reality of what it's like to have a conversation in Manila. So they thought about a massive open online course as a central part of it. This is where each week there would be content and conversation going on. Then each week they wanted to hold a webinar, a live event, that was a moment of inspiration, that was a moment of, okay, this is why this is really important. And they got really interesting people in. So they had someone from Harvard Law come along to think about, this is what negotiation looks like in a courtroom, or something like that. So when we're talking about difficult conversations, these are difficult conversations this person has. Not meant to be the moment of learning, it's meant to be the moment of inspiration. And then they took it back into not only their internal tools, they have a lot of internal tools, but also the appraisal process itself. So, over the course of the summer, this is their MOOC. It ran almost a year ago. They called it Brilliant Conversations. They put it together themselves. They did this internally. They didn't have my help. They wanted to run this as a 5-week online event. So it was timed. There was a start date and an end date. You didn't have to be there all the time. Webinars were recorded. But it started and it finished. Each week, new content would be made available, new conversations, as they progressed people through a social learning journey. It actually took them about 6 weeks to put it together in the first place. So 5 weeks run time, about 6 weeks to put it together in front of it. And they were actually doing things the night before the week unlocked. So on the Sunday of week 2, they're in there reflecting on the conversation that's gone on and modifying the content of week 3. Because it's only these short videos, so it's not a big deal to be like, oh, we've got to reconstruct the e-learning. It's like, right, we're going to get a TED talk because actually that's really relevant from here. Or somebody's recommended some content here and it's really relevant that everybody else sees that. So they're able to curate content, not just from inside the organization, but also outside. This is what it looked like. So each week you had an objective, then you had the webinar pinned to the top, and then different content down the screen. Gamified, so we've got a points target. They had 15 points you had to get out of this level, but there were hundreds of points on offer. So it's nudging people towards it, but you chose where and how you wanted to participate. They didn't tell you. When you launch a piece of content, in this case it was a video, so this is something they shot internally, very cheaply, but effectively, black screen, real people, talking for 3 or 4 minutes about how they have conversations. And at the end of the video, there will be a discussion question. And so folks are coming down and talking about how feedback is important and what's given. It was segregated into the different zones, so Europe, AMEA, various things like that. So you didn't have to go through every comment if you didn't want to. You don't have to read any of the comments if you don't want to. It's autonomous. You also got opportunities to contribute back. So at the end of each week, there was a challenge, something to get people adding back to the MOOC environment. And so in this case, this is Kelly Beater from California. Kelly was one of their best contributors, and she was just shooting a quick video off her laptop, just on the camera there, just in the browser, to lob it up there and say, this is how I'm going to apply lessons from this week. So each week, present content, present a webinar, have conversations about it, and then get you to contribute back about what you're going to do differently. Oop. The end of the 5 weeks, this is kind of what we saw when we started looking at the data. They had 3,500 or so people register. This is a completely voluntary activity, so they didn't enforce that team leaders or managers had to do this. Nobody had to do this. You could go and sign up. People were curious on what the heck a MOOC was, so they did go and sign up. And then of those 3,500 that signed up, about 2,000 were what we would call active in the experience. And an active user for us is somebody who completes at least a week. Again, I'm not interested in you getting to the end of all of this. I'm interested in you changing your mindset about something. These numbers are not typical of MOOCs. They're actually much better than you get out of a MOOC in the real wide world place. But I think you've got to get over, again, completion's not the goal. Participation, insight, inspiration, changing behavior is the goal. But if I was counting comments, they had a lot. 31,000 contributions came in from those people over the 5 weeks. Actually very, very popular in Southeast Asia. Huge participation from Southeast Asia, especially around video content, people uploading stuff back into it. Didn't necessarily take us by surprise, but it's quite reinforcement that actually there really are cultural differences around the world. As the weeks went by, the length of time someone tended to spend on the platform went up. So we started off in week 1, people were averaging about 17 minutes, and by the end of it, they were on there for half an hour or so. There's a lot more content, but actually you tend to see that when you launch any sort of learning experience, engagement goes the other way. You know, the first way you send out the email, oh yeah, massive spike. And then when I send out the last email that says, hey, you've got 24 hours to complete or I'm shutting you out, massive spike. And then this bathtub in the middle of nothing. But social learning experiences like this benefit from network effect. They get better as more people participate. There's more to be had, there's more to see, there's more to review. They're getting ping notifications and updates when their friends and people start logging on and doing stuff. They're seeing it on Yammer, on Chatter. They want to be part of the webinars. Each week, people started getting together to actually watch the webinar together in the room. And then the final piece that they asked us to take a look at was around measuring this, around coming up with an idea of whether or not this had made a difference. Because one of the things that's really difficult to do is to understand the value of social learning purely in your organizational terms. And so all of the experiences that were part of this, we were capturing with what's called the XAPI. Anybody come across XAPI? A couple people. So this is a new emerging standard in learning that allows you to capture details of a learning experience. It allows you to know that people have watched videos, made comments, done things like this. We were capturing all of this data as we went. And then we were performing analysis on it. So not only did that analysis give us all of these stats, but it also gave us this one. At the end of each week, this one specifically, week 2 to 4, we were measuring whether people were actually changing their behavior. Remember, we wanted them to have better, different feedback conversations. And so when we actually looked at the content of things, level 1 answers are people saying, yeah, I understand that. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, understood. This is, I understand the model. I think I know what you're talking about. They're sort of generally sounding appreciation that they know that they have done the work. But that's really all they're doing. At level 2, they're starting to integrate that new idea with their own mindset. They're starting to think, this is how I might do something differently. So given the feedback model, given the knowledge that I shouldn't be having this conversation out in the front desk, next time I have this situation, this is what I'm going to do. And level 3 was evidence of people actually doing it. So they had said, I understood the model. I thought about how I was going to try something, and then I've tried it, and this is how it went. This is what was new for me. They were reflecting back on a real world experience. And so this is measuring week 2 to week 4, and we started to see this slide. It keep going if I could get along the slide. But the idea is that week 2, nearly half of the contributions are people saying, I understand. For me, that's where a lot of social learning stops. It would be wonderful if everybody logged on to say they understood. But that's not enough. I want to change behavior. So at level 2, we've got another 50-odd% of people saying, yeah, I'm going to try and do something different. And in that second week, we had about 7% of people who were evidencing they'd already done something different. And through using techniques like Socratic questioning, poking people towards better responses. We're starting to move this as we go through. Still only about 35% of people at level 1. Much bigger group of people starting to be intentional in their language. And then about 12% of people giving us evidence that they've done it. This is a work in progress. This is something that we need to get our heads around. But I really do feel that we can start measuring absolute value in terms of a social experience, much more so than we can with just normal e-learning or face-to-face stuff. Because I can get to some of this data and I can start telling you whether or not people are trying new behaviors in the real world. IHG did all this themselves. We gave them the tools, but they facilitated, they ran it, they coordinated it completely. They've been shortlisted for a Learning Technology Award for all of this. They did wonderful work. So, I think we've got about 5-10 minutes left or so, and I'm happy to think about questions and answers and more. I think about putting all of this together in a cycle. So I don't think about social learning in isolation, and I think that's important to sort of think about there. I think that social learning can be a part of a kind of an agile way in which you approach learning, that we're going to go and do a MOOC. But actually, we've got to think about how we're going to measure it and how we're going to plan what people do next. So this is what I advocate now, is thinking about harnessing the power of social learning as part of a wider plan, of planning action, of doing social stuff, and of measuring it, trying to get to the results that I just showed you. You can have a go. We run free MOOCs at hd2labs.com. There's one on LearnX API, which clearly you all need, and that's available now. So you can go on and have a look and be a learner and understand what it's like to take a massive open online course and to be more social. Do be on the lookout for people way beyond us that do massive open online courses. Look at Coursera, look at edX, look at the universities that are doing wonderful things with freely available open content. And reflect on the social nature of it. Could it work for your organization? Do you need to be more structured? Think about the playbook. What is it you need to do to nudge people from just having a good idea in the shower and forgetting about it, to actually doing something about it, to telling someone, to sharing it, to progressing it to a new behavior, a new way of working? It is possible to harness the sort of social learning and to actually make it work for you. Thanks ever so much for your time. Would anybody like to hit me with a question?
Can you talk more about the Socratic questioning, how that was used? I understand the gamification and the short content.
So Socratic questioning, so the question was, how does Socratic questioning used? Well, a couple of different ways. One is, one of the things that we find most effective when we're trying to get people to participate in the first place is setting a discussion question of some kind, of giving someone something to answer. That is absolutely magic for getting participation. So whenever at the end of those videos in IHG there was a question, you can write it in text, you can do whatever, but people find it much easier to answer something, to answer a question. How will you apply this in the real world? And the shape of your discussion question really goes on to talk about how the quality of that contribution comes out. So we really do get data on what's a really bad discussion question, what's a really good discussion question. So like, what's a really bad discussion question is, how do you feel about this? Or something like that, like, I don't know, stuff. But being very decisive and actually stating at the top that you take a position as the administrator, as the subject matter expert, take a controversial position and ask people to debate, to ask people to take a side and then defend it, to tear you apart, to do whatever. So I don't think you just have to use this in terms of replying to people. You set out the conversation with deliberately provocative questioning or something that helps nurture new ideas. So I think the first place I think about Socratic questioning is asking discussion questions, hugely influential in how people do it.
Did you do that for the webinar? Did you do that for the videos? How did you do it?
So it was preset. So the idea is that when they were building, each week, they're putting in content and then they're going, what would be a compelling discussion question to go with this content? Because it's kind of the so what of the content. So you watch an inspirational TED talk and then it's, this is a lovely TED talk, but it could never work at IHG. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you do here? Things like that. You can go completely crazy if you want to. Come up with a 3-word haiku about the way of which process management is going to influence something. Something that makes people stop, pause, think. Really what we're looking to do is push them towards being more evidence-based, to think about why they're getting to something. And if you do have the privilege of being able to moderate or facilitate in real time, so that, you know, somebody asks a question and your job is to go in and reply or to check that they've got an understanding, then you'd use this technique again to start teasing out more detail. Why is it you feel like that? What evidence? Can you tell me a time? Can you give me a link to something like that? Does that make sense? Cool. Thank you. Anybody else?
You said that this was quite well received at IHG. Do you know how they communicated it? You said people said, what's a MOOC, and therefore I'm going to go on. How did they communicate that?
So lots of different ways. They have intranet, which is well-liked and popular. They sent out physical literature around the world about the MOOC is coming and things like that. And then they were very, very proactive at resharing and curating what people did. So at week one, we're not expecting people to have changed the world at week one, but we are expecting people to engage and to think about this is going to be exciting. So their end of level challenge was actually a selfie challenge at the end of week one. Show us where you are in the world. And then at that point, they're sending out emails to the rest of the management population, showing people at their desk, wherever they are, doing things and getting it on. So that was really, to be honest with you, that's their biggest thing. And actually, I think to a certain extent, that's what MOOC providers actually do. If you look at what Coursera is really good at marketing. And so I think the way in which you market yourself is interesting. You get a shot at this maybe, and then maybe not if it goes badly wrong. But it's different. It's exciting. People didn't know what it was. They played on the mystery, and they went through it. But basically internal comms. So.
Hi, you talked about the fact that one of the challenges that a lot of businesses face with social is empty blogs, people not engaging. So the question is 2 parts really. The first, how have you specifically tackled that issue with the way that you approach it? And secondly, do you think the fact that Facebook are now entering the corporate space with their platform that is familiar to pretty much everyone could be a game changer for this kind of area of learning?
So I'll answer the second one first and come back that way. I think it's interesting. I think a lot of the corporate clients that I talk to are so scared of social at various points that the thought of Facebook at work scares the bejesus out of them. And so I worry for that. But I don't think they'd have done it if they didn't have some idea that they could change something or do something different. They've got the best tools. They are the social network. I think the difficulty they will face is that we each have different personas. We have different lives. And so I don't necessarily want anything to do with work on Facebook. And so how they manage that, not just from the organization, but from the individual point of view, I think that's a bit tricky. So they've got challenges to overcome. But the fact they're doing it, they must have put a business case together that says, this is big. We've got to be part of that. How do we get people to engage? Well, I mean, it comes back to kind of having a plan. Because, I mean, that's as simple as it is having a plan that provides value. So the number of times I get people coming to me and say, we're going to build a community. And you're like, okay, why would I participate in your community? Because it's a community. Everybody participates in the community. And you're like, but what value do I get from this? And what's the purpose of actually sharing? How do I get more of it? And so I think people overlook basics sometimes, that actually the value of a community of practice is that I get to talk with some special people, do some special things. So in this case, one of the things that they brought in with value in that top corner is access to experts that you can't get to. They gave us some access to people that people might have heard of, were generally interested in, and kind of like, okay, this is different, this is interesting. So they're providing some immediate value from it there. Then latterly, they're providing value in terms of that it's the way they position the MOOC is, social's just the way that worked. Like, it wasn't, oh, by the way, the forum's over here, please complete the blog when you've got time. To go through the levels and get more points, which people do pay for, being social is part of it. And when they see that people, there's a whole voting mechanism inside this, which says that if you make quality contributions, people can vote you up or vote you down. And based on that, you can earn more points. One of the things that they've got is actually a reason for being voted up. So when you hit that vote up button, you have to choose from one of a pick list of 3 reasons as to why you're voting it up. And that helps to shape the Socratic questioning. Look, because it gives me a great example, because it does something, but it's just the way it works. So, long answer to simple question, have a plan. Most people just get, you walk out onto the floor and you get someone like me come at you and say, would you like a social network? I would. I would very much like one of those. Or it gets hoisted upon you from somewhere else. Use the social network. Why? Because if you can't prove value for it, then it's not going to fly. It's got to be part of a plan. Does that make sense? One there, one there.
I just going back to the screen that you had about the voting on there. It's just I really like the layout that you had for that. I just wondering what platform that was built on.
Man after my own heart. This is my platform. It's called Curator. You can buy it for a very low price. And actually, there's a different layout that most people now use where it's on the side. But yeah, this is Curator. It's a platform that we make at HT2 Labs. There are others like it. You'll see more like it. Start Googling around for a social learning platform. Look at a MOOC provider. Go look at what Coursera looks like. Look at what FutureLearn looks like. It's UK from the Open University's offering. Have a look at what they look like. They're very simple, very easy, not very LMS-y, and really shaped around content and conversation. But this is Curator. Go to ht2labs.com and tell them Ben sent you. Thank you. Got one more over here.
Have you got any examples of how you overcome sort of like a generational divide? I can see sort of like the younger folks obviously getting on board with all this, but how you overcome, obviously with a senior leadership position, you've got people who are older, may not be so wedded to or comfortable with social interaction, how you overcome that organisationally?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think I've seen in reality a generational difference in most of this. What I have seen is attitudes and approaches and the sorts of things that people are willing to share and do. So like, if I get a group of C-suite people into a workshop room, it is not difficult to get them talking and disagree about what they do. So that they learn socially, all they do is listen to themselves talk. So, you know, there's definitely nothing generational about that. That you've got a bunch of engineers who really like working on the workshop floor and grudgingly won't log into this or that or the other, then that is more difficult. But there are a huge range of tools that you can do that reach out, that are things like that. So we talked about Slack a little bit. That's a communications platform, very simple to use. Get a little app, mostly free. Little tools and things like that that lower the barriers. I think the problem is just the sheer annoyance of the user experience, especially as you get more senior. I have not got time to log on to this, to click to the LMS, to find the course, to go to the thing, to have a chat. Got to put it right in front of them. So I don't necessarily think it's about that people can or won't be social, because I think social learning is just the way it is. And I think senior people have got just as much and more to say. They may be more sensitive about how and where they say it. Who else is in the room? What Chatham House rules do we have going on? Who am I exposing myself to? They're risk averse, so I'll give you that, certainly. So you've got to think about the way in which you structure that and how guarded they are or not about their messaging. And then you've got to lower the barriers. You've got to lower the barriers. So sometimes it'll be a social learning platform like this in a MOOC, and other times it will be better mentoring, better coaching, better anything that we can do to lower the barriers to people and get it there. So that's been my experience. Others may have different experiences. Does that make sense? Thank you ever so much for your time, guys. If you've got any more, you want to see me, you come up at the end. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day.